Welcome to Distro Podcast.
Okay, so on today's episode of the Distro Podcast, we've got David Adams as our featured guest. David is the founder and CEO of Vento. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. David, we'd love to get to know you. Can you share with us about, who you are, your background, where you're from, and all of that fun stuff?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, but I've sort of ping-ponged back between the East Coast and West Coast and the Mountain West, where I live currently in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I sort of became a software entrepreneur by accident. In the mid 90s, when I was still an undergraduate, I got together with some other young people, and the thing that we all had in common was a fanatical enthusiasm about the internet, which was I guess coming into the public consciousness at that time. And we got together and decided that we wanted to start an internet company. What we eventually landed on was e-commerce. And we built a product called ShopSite that was, you can think of it as a proto-Shopify. It was what we would now call software as a service to help small businesses sell their wares online. And, and that company, to our surprise, became successful. And I sort of took that success and plowed it into another e-commerce company, building a more sophisticated and more B2B oriented e-commerce platform. And that company was acquired. I worked it was acquired by Red Hat Software, of Red Hat Linux fame. And I worked at Red Hat for several years and actually helped Red Hat make the transition from primarily a publishing business, selling CDs, to a subscription service business, which sort of propelled them into the 21st century. And then in my career, I've sort of developed a specialty in SaaS B2B automation, and have worked in a bunch of different industries. I like to characterize it as going into boring industries or boring segments that have a big problem with inefficient processes and bringing efficiency and automation in there. So I've worked in the travel industry, in the public sector, law enforcement space, the health insurance, credit card payments, and commercial real estate operations. Bringing automated solutions into those industries, and I've had a pretty good track record. I've founded or co-founded 5 VC funded startups, and I've had 5 successful exits.
That's impressive. Most entrepreneurs can't say that they're 5 for 5. So well done. You answered one of my questions, which is, have you kind of always just tried to stay in the e-commerce space and, continue to innovate and keep up with the ever-changing landscape in e-commerce? But you answered the question already that you kind of found your way into some of these other industries that were lacking,
Yeah, I will say in a lot of cases, helping people transact online really has been a common thread through what I've done, but but the types of transactions or the stages of the transactions that I focused on has changed and increased in complexity and obscurity. So my last entrepreneurial success story was chargeback.com, which I was co-founder of. We started that about 8 years ago. And I mean, essentially what we set out to do was bring automation to a segment of the payments industry that really wasn't automated at all. And that is the process of merchants dealing with credit card disputes. So, approximately 1% of e-commerce transactions come back disputed, and merchants are just going to lose that money unless they can prepare essentially a legal brief to send back to the credit card bank, making the case for why that dispute is illegitimate. And that when we started, at least, that was primarily a manual process. And so we banged our head against that problem for 5 years, and brought it to, in some cases, 100% automation.
That's impressive. What was that company called?
Chargeback.com.
Chargeback.com. Very cool. Yeah. What a problem to solve. Nice work. So you, when was your last venture that you founded or co-founded, prior to now?
So Chargeback was the last company that I founded, that I've been involved in, so it was acquired about almost 3 years ago by Sift, which is one of the leading the leading fraud detection companies. So Sift has really focused on using machine learning and AI to, in real time, tell merchants when a new order comes in, is this a legitimate order? Is this fraudulent, or is this coming from some sort of abuse of the payment system, in which case don't fulfill this order, reject this order. And the reason why the match between Sift and Chargeback was very good is that there are certain types of orders that are going to come back disputed. In many cases, it's because the credit card, it's not actually it's not a straightforward case of fraud. It's not a stolen credit card that somebody's using. In a lot of cases, people are using their own credit card, and then they just lie to the bank and they say, "Oh, it wasn't me. I didn't place that order." And they get the goods, and it's basically high-tech shoplifting. So those types of orders, for example, are not usually, you can't usually detect that's going to be a bad order. And so, what you need to do is you need to catch that at the other end. You need to show the credit card bank that this is somebody using their own credit card to send to their own house, or to their own workplace, and therefore you should overturn this dispute. Send those people packing, right? So it's a good combination of catching bad orders at the beginning of the process and mopping up from the bad orders at the end of the process.
Very cool. So that was acquired a few years ago, and now how long have you been building Vento and getting into Vento?
Well, so I'd sort of alternated in my career between building 0 to 1 startups and coming into companies that are in more scale-up mode to help them work through some kind of crisis or inflection point. And so when I left after the acquisition of Chargeback by Sift, I didn't actually go on to work at Sift. Instead, I took a job with a Australia-based prop tech company that made a product to automate processes, automate operations, and to build sort of hyperlocal marketplaces at big office complexes and mixed use properties, and worldwide. And they had some product development related problems, and one of them is kind of common for companies at that stage. This is a company that had been operating for about 10 years, and they built solid revenues, but because they had allowed the product roadmap to be dictated in a lot of cases by the demands of whoever their biggest, juiciest client was at the time, that their product had become really sprawling and had a lot of sort of little half-baked projects that had been built in order to satisfy some line item in a proposal, or to scratch an itch for a particular client, and they really needed help, like focusing in on a core set of functionality. And the company was also trying to do a big geographical push into both North America and Europe out of Australia. And so I spent about 2 years helping that company work its way through some of those problems. And then I started feeling the entrepreneurial itch again. And I had been in contact with some former colleagues, some guys that had worked at Benefitter, which was the startup that I had founded prior to Chargeback.com. And at Benefitter, we had built a bunch of very cool tools to help automate the process of enrolling and onboarding people into health insurance programs. And Benefitter actually ended up being acquired by United Healthcare. And when United Healthcare applied the Benefitter enrollment tools to their enrollment in the small group health insurance space, they actually saw a 24% increase in their sales. Wow. And we'd noticed this over and over again, that bringing good design and bringing thoughtful, well-designed automation tools to enrollment and onboarding workflows within the health insurance space, you could really move the needle. And so while I was doing my thing, a couple of my former colleagues from Benefitter had been sort of ruminating on this. How can we bring what we've learned about enrollment and onboarding to other industry segments, especially in financial services, insurance, real estate, etc. And then with the proliferation of generative AI, that was the sort of shock that really woke us up. Because one of the things that really slows things down when you're trying to enroll and onboard somebody to a new financial services product is that a lot of times there are documents. There are a lot of documents that they may need to provide in order to verify their identity, in order to indicate like what kinds of financial accounts they have, in order to make decisions about their credit worthiness, in order to make determinations about how strong the business is if you're signing up for a business product. And it can be very difficult for people to fill out the forms correctly, to upload the correct documents. And then you have human beings who are intaking all of these forms, who are reading them, and they're reading the documents, and they're seeing, okay, did they submit everything? Did they do it properly? Are these documents out of date, etc.? And one of the things that we realized is, why make human beings, sometimes days or even weeks later, review all of these documents to make sure that they're good, when instead we can enslave robots and we can force them to read those documents. So, what we're doing is we're walking people through the steps of enrolling in these products or onboarding themselves to these products and services, and we're having intelligent, AI-powered co-pilots review everything in real time while they're doing it, in order to make sure that they're doing it right. And that really compresses the time that people need, and addresses the serious problem of errors and omissions in those enrollment and onboarding workflows.
Very cool. Very interesting. It's like you said, it's not like it's probably not a problem that most people are, in the tech industry are thinking of, but definitely makes a big impact when solved for.
And if you ever talk to somebody who's opened a commercial bank account or a commercial insurance policy or signed a commercial lease, they know the pain. It's like, why does it take weeks to do this process, and why do they need so many documents, and why do I need to fill out the same forms over and over again? And so anyway, what we're learning, right now we're in a discovery stage, and I'm just trying to find as many people as I can who are working in financial services, who are sort of dealing with this problem on their end. I'm just trying to talk to as many people and learn as much as I can about those problems as we're designing different solutions and trying to bring them to market.
So transitioning into the core topic of building a strong team and finding key team players. You've had 5 companies with 5 successful exits. How important has it been within each of those companies to find and hire really strong key team members, like foundational key team members, in leading to the success of those companies?
Well, I mean, obviously it's tremendously important to get good people, to get the right people. And having the right team really does make the difference between success and failure. I have noticed, though, that people tend to be pretty bad at identifying the attributes that are actually crucial when trying to fill these positions. I think that just to make some broad generalizations, I think that, in my opinion, subject matter expertise is overweighted, especially when it comes to having everybody on the team already have subject matter expertise. So what I mean by this is, for example, let's say we're building a fintech product that's related to mortgage lending, right? Does every single person on your team need to be a mortgage lending expert? I would say if you're making that a priority, you're making a big mistake, because yes, you do need to have some people. You do need to have some stone cold mortgage lending experts on your team, but a lot of the trickiest problems that you're going to be solving are not mortgage lending problems. They are DevOps problems. They are product marketing problems. They are customer success problems. And it's way more important to have someone who is a stone cold expert in customer success, even if they have no mortgage lending experience at all. And so, in many, many ways, diversity of all kinds is good to have on the team, and that includes diversity of experience.
You touch on you mentioning the whole component of diversity, whether it's culture or experience or whatever. So far, it's been one of the most common like attributes of a high performing, strong team. We've interviewed so many executives and founders, and almost all of them have mentioned having a diverse group of people, a diverse team. And so it's interesting that you say that too.
And a lot of it is because you don't really realize the value of, let's call it, fresh eyes, right? Or a divergent set of prior experiences in so many cases. You don't realize that what value that's going to be until until it happens. So it doesn't surprise me that that's common.
Yeah. Speaking of diversity, we're coming up a little bit closer to time, but speaking of diversity, do you have experience and have you worked with people from other countries? Like, have you hired people outside of the United States?
Yes. I've had a truly mixed experience there. So, starting very early, in my first startup, in the mid 90s, we already had what you'd now call a hybrid workplace. And, we had some remote, members of the team, remote developers. And, then, I went on a few years later to work for, a larger company that had offices across the country and around the world, and I was working with, with people in the UK, in the US, Asia, Latin America, and some working in offices and others working at home offices, and so I became accustomed to that, and not only started to use tools to facilitate that kind of collaboration, but actually, at Red Hat, because some of the tools didn't exist, we set out and built some tools to assist with collaboration. Scratching our own itch and even putting those tools out to market. And then, I went on to work with offshore dev teams, and I've worked with teams that by way of agencies, And that my experience there has generally been bad. The people, the people who were doing the work really weren't committed to us, and they were sort of treated like interchangeable parts. But also, I've had experience, hiring offshore developers, but having them, work more directly for us and to be employees or de facto employees. I've had some great experiences working with developers, especially in Latin America and Central and Eastern Europe, where I've found fantastic talent.
Yeah, it's interesting because oftentimes, working through an offshore agency, or like you have experience with, it's hard to pin any challenges or difficulties on the people that you're working with, because a lot of the time the challenges that come from that model are in the actual model itself, or the operating model. So it's unique that you've been able to experience both sides of that, where you've worked with them directly and through an agency. But again, it brings a lot of different dynamic and diversity to your experience and building these teams. What in closing, David, what would you say is like some advice or the biggest lesson you've learned, in finding and hiring key team members or building your teams, that has helped lead to the amount of success that you've seen so far?
Well, I'll have to say that in both startups and scale-ups, there's an undercurrent of urgency and even chaos with everything that you're doing, and you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have triumphs and you're going to have defeats. And really, when it comes to the team, what really is going to make the difference between success and failure isn't how people. It's not people operating when everything is good. It's how do they operate when everything is terrible that really matters. When things are falling apart, when everybody is stressed out, when the knives come out and everybody's trying to deflect blame away from themselves, and that's where the true test, not only of individuals, but how is your organization like operating as a unit, and how good really is your culture? And the thing about it is that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing to really test for until it happens. But I do, when I'm talking to people and I'm interviewing people, I do like to try to delve into that a little bit, to try to get them to tell some stories about, what have they done when everything's going wrong. People don't like to talk about any kind of failures when they're talking about themselves or their career, especially in a job interview setting. But you can learn a lot more by hearing the sort of the gritty war stories, and then the LinkedIn profile.
Well, it's like you said, not that it doesn't matter, but who cares if you can share what's worked out really well for you? Like, what about the things that haven't? How have you handled that? That's such a vital thing to try to understand about individuals that you're considering to work with you. I appreciate you sharing that. That's great. That's great. A great word of advice. A friend of mine, successful entrepreneur, exited entrepreneur, not long ago, told me that the number one the most important question they ask in any interview, whether it's a very entry level position or, a potential co-founder that they might be bringing on, is what's the hardest thing you've ever done or have ever been through? And oftentimes you'll find just in what they talk about is, are they still kind of trying to paint a picture for you, put on the side, or are they being authentic about what that experience was? And then the follow-up to whatever they share is, the follow-up question being, and how did you handle that? What did you do about that? And, for me, I would be looking for ownership, kind of what you're saying. Like, are they pointing the finger? Are they, was it all just that they're a victim in the circumstance? So that's a great word of advice. And I think more people, more companies should be considering that in their interviews and, as they're prospecting people to come and work for them, build their team. Well, David, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and hearing some of your experiences, hearing some of your story. I don't know if I'm listening in. This is David Adams, a successful entrepreneur with multiple exits, now building and leading the front with Bento. Excited to hear more about that and see what you guys do. And thank you again for your time, and looking forward to seeing all the other accomplishments from what you guys are building.